Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm a little bit shorter, so I'm going to adjust. So yes, my name is Marie Gunter. I am the commercial developer for Grid Alternatives. Grid is based in Oakland, California, and they're the largest nonprofit provider of not only solar installation, but they also provide technical assistance. They provide a strong workforce development program, which includes bringing volunteers in and training them. One of the issues that we find, as Sean had mentioned, is that there are a lot of people who get left on the margin. They don't have the opportunities. And so what we do in the communities that we serve, which are low risk, low earners, and oftentimes people who don't have the education to just normally show up on a job site and apply for a position, is to come to Grid, who oftentimes works in conjunction with other job trainers in the community, and we can train them up. Then we invite them, after a safety training of course, to a job site. They help with our professional installers. They are on the roof, they're on the ground, they're bending conduit, they're understanding the principles of solar and how that works. If they are interested, they can do a more formal education, and then actually we help them with interviewing skills, going out and applying for jobs, helping them find targets for jobs and become employable. So this is one of the things that really attracted me to Grid. I've been in the solar industry about close to a decade now. I started on the for-profit side, working for a company called Sungevity, which some of you may know about. They didn't survive the market. They unfortunately declared bankruptcy a few years ago, which gave me the opportunity to really stretch myself, go back to the nonprofit world, and see what I could do in solar along this line. So as a passion, since I was a child, I've always been very connected to the environment. I've always been very connected to social justice. I photograph and travel, trekking and hiking, meeting people from all over the world, having conversations and interviewing folks to really get to the heart of this environment to humanity connection, which is really what I think it's about. So when we think about social justice, what I think about through the lens of my role in Grid is what are some things that companies can be doing to bring people from the margins more into the conversation? What are some of the things that we can do on a day-to-day basis that might be getting a little bit ignored? I've heard you explain this, but quick tip on how to change this.
Tap the screen and then tap it.
Oh, I have to tap the screen itself?
Does it make the screen active and then?
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So Grid has a triple bottom line: people, planet, and employment, which is what I just described to you. But it's not just a marketing ploy or what some people might refer to as greenwashing. It really is an integral part of how we run our business. From the time that you come in for an interview, we are actually targeting and looking for people who have this mindset, which obviously is something that's necessary before you can even, Okay, thank you for your patience. The company has a vision, a successful transition, not just to clean renewable energy, but one that includes everyone. And so again, that's just really speaking to where the company is going. We do focus on low-income at-risk communities. The higher goal of climate change needs to come into play because that's what the company was originally founded on as a basis for providing solar PV. I mentioned that we provide job training and volunteer opportunities for green jobs. And then we're also looking out in the industry, which is one of the reasons I'm at this conference and I'm attending other conferences. It's how I met Sean at Housing California in Sacramento, looking for developers who are doing multifamily commercial, but also who have this broader mindset of wanting to bring workers and employees into their realm, either as full-time employees or looking for volunteers on their jobs. So I think everybody in this room knows what social justice is from their own perspective, knows what decarbonization is, but I'm just wondering if anyone here has thought about those two together and how they relate. When we think about social justice, I'm not really asking a question, it's a little bit rhetorical, but just in your own mind, what does that really mean to you? Are you thinking about fairness, opportunity, diversity? And it's not just about a racial perspective. Of course, that's my perspective because as a person of color, I have to advocate for myself on a daily basis. I'm also holding space for others who are people of color to do the same. And so as I learn and am making inroads, I want to be able to share the things that are working, much like each of you are sharing what's working for you in your case scenarios. So this is something that is important to me, and this is why I'm excited to be here to share this with you. At the highest level at GRID, something that makes me feel very secure that this is a real thing is this is built into and is expected of the leadership. And I always feel like anytime you're trying to implement change across an organization, it has to start from the top down. And this could be daunting for some people. There are people who've gone from job to job over the course of their entire career, and maybe they've never had to deal with a person of color. Maybe they've never had to deal with a person with a different gender identity. Maybe they've never had to deal with a person who wears a head wrap or has a form of dress that is different than theirs. And so it can be a little bit unsettling if there aren't those ways or tools to engage, and you're just sort of trying to fight it through and never quite embracing each other, and that affects the work. So at GRID, each member of the executive leadership team is actually required to advance the organization's equity, inclusion, and diversity work. They're also
You gotta know what throughout the color someone is.
Throughout the
Yeah,
Mediterranean.
anywhere rural area is. We're back on. Okay.
Thank you, Sean. The diversion.
Just imagine everyone's got a different tan. That's what's going on. We're all just tan in a different color.
Okay, so that's no problem. No, thank you for the segue. I appreciate that. So yeah, sorry for the interruption there. So race as not a real thing, but race actually in other ways, of course, is very real in this country. The history of this country, labor has been valued over humanity, and so the situation has come to something that we recognize as still being an issue. If you look at the time of slavery and you look at the time now of what's happened to people of color, it's sort of just gone sort of from one place to the next, and that transition is referred to as slavery to incarceration. More Black, brown, people of color are in prison than any other race in the United States. I just came from Alabama through a cohort through GRID, which attended the Equity, Justice, and Inclusion Museum in Alabama, which was founded by Brian Stevenson. He's a social activist and also a social justice attorney. And one of the things that he studies is mass incarceration of Black men and children who are on death row and children who have unjust sentences. And so he and his team are fighting constantly to get these folks off of death row and into more tenable situations. The museum itself, which I will not show pictures of, it's fairly graphic, but it speaks to what we were just talking about in terms of finding labor, looking at your own situation, being sensitive to the fact that these things actually do exist in society, and even if they do not affect you immediately, the higher goal that we're going for towards climate change and decarbonization, all of that affects people who are on the margins even more intensely, because those are the people who can't find affordable housing. They're in areas of the community that don't have clean water, that don't have necessarily the amenities that you would find if you were in a healthier environment. So how do we get those people back into the mix? Because it just sort of devolves from there. When people don't have a job, they don't have health care, they tend to turn to crime, they tend to have drug problems, and it just exasperates itself. So rather than just locking everyone up with the hope of, well, let's just get these people, you know, out of sight, out of mind, and maybe that will solve it, why don't we bring them back into the community by actually giving them job skills, appreciating them as a human being and treating them as such. And I think this is something that the movement of the environment plays into quite severely. I think it is excellent what we're doing. The whole role of decarbonization, bringing electrification to buildings, bringing electrification to cities. City of Berkeley is a huge model. We're right next door. I would love to talk to you to find out how can we get that going in Oakland. All of that comes together to just raise everyone up. So while we were at the museum in Alabama, a friend of mine, Candace Chu, I don't know if she's on the line, but I want to thank you so much. She made the comment, I think this should be like JEDI, not just equity and diversity and inclusion. And I love that, because I think that all the work that each of you are doing in this room is somewhat magical, even if you don't think about it that way. We're really moving not just the needle, but it's sort of a revolution. I always like to be at the driving edge of innovation. I came from Silicon Valley in the high-tech world, where the commercialization of the internet was what, you know, I sort of built my career on. And so I look for that in this space. Like, that was very exciting, but working on sustainability is a lot more rewarding. And I think that everything that we're doing in this room has that same impact and has that same drive and has that same energy. So if you're thinking about yourselves and what you're doing day to day, think of yourself as a JEDI mind. And then remember that the acronym stands for Justice, Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion. It's a collective action. So you know what decarbonization is. The community impact I've already talked about. Net zero carbon, I personally think, is one of the most important things that we can be doing in society that also solves a lot of our social justice issues. And the conversations, these are some of the conversations that I'm looking to have if anyone's interested to connect with me. I'm interested in talking to land developers. I'm interested in talking to people who are in affordable housing. If you're working at the community level, health and education, if you're doing tenant engagement and education, also if you're looking to do green jobs and job fairs, that's certainly something that GRID has a program that they can address. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Owen over there would like.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I have a